Back in 2004, myself and a good friend from Israel, Hadaz Feldman, set off on a 5,000-mile marine odyssey to circumnavigate Japan. I'd been in the army some years before, and I guess when I walked onto that expedition, I walked on with a guardsman mentality. But after enduring numerous typhoons and monsoon-driven winds, exploring amazing coastline and seeing some amazing wildlife, and also experiencing the gratitude and the gracefulness of the local population, I actually left that expedition more hippie than guardsman. Much more than this, that expedition created a turning point for me in my life. It allowed me to redefine my life goals, where I wanted to go with my career, but it also allowed me to reflect back into my life and to look at some of the mental health issues which I'd probably absorbed in the earlier parts of my lifetime. My mum, she told me that she found me in a rock pool in North Devon. She often told me that she was going to return me there if I didn't behave. I found my own way home, Mum, and that's pretty much where I reside now, on the coast. I put this slide up there, not because I'm a cute bunny, but because it's where I had my first wow moment in life. I'd been pestering my mum and dad for some days to buy me a boat, and they eventually relented and purchased for me an inflatable canoe. It was actually an inflatable pink crocodile, but within the industry, I'd blow it if I had missed that, other than today. I can remember getting into that pink alligator crocodile and paddling out into the surf. We call it the soup zone. It's that area where the water is all white and frothy, and I can remember punching through that surf zone and eventually getting beyond the last wave and looking to the horizon. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I was going to get there. I carried on paddling and I watched the vista change, and from this flat green carpet of water in front of me, it started to change shape and rear up in front of me. And eventually, I experienced Neptune's breath for the first time. This cascading white water came down on top of me, absolutely encapsulated myself and the crocodile, filled it up with water, my legs spilt out over the side, and very unceremoniously, I got surfed back onto the beach, picked up by a lifeguard and taken back to my mum. Even now, when I'm breaking out through the North Cornwall surf or leading off on an expedition, quite often I get back into that moment, that first original wow factor. And I think that's important, that we have these wow factors when we're very young in life, or it was certainly important for me. My expeditions, they give me the opportunity to reflect. It's like a meditation in motion, and it gives me the opportunity to engage with the natural environment on a regular basis. That area where the fluid mass of the ocean swell meets terra firma is dynamic, and it's an awe-inspiring place. I love it. I alluded to the fact that I was in the military some years ago, and in 1977, I went down to my local careers office and I tried to join the army. I was 15 years old. The career sergeant, he gave me some papers and he says, "You're too young, boy." He says, "You need to go home, get your dad to sign these and come back when you're 16. Which I did. I turned up back of that careers office when I was 16 years old, and I got accepted based on that original application. And I journeyed down to Purbright in Surrey, and I joined what's known as the 1st Regiment of Foot Guards, or more commonly known as the Grenadier Guards. Basic training was tough, it was challenging, it was hard, just as you would expect it to be to go into the army. But the basic training, the stuff that took place in the barrack room was also quite torturous. There was initiation rites that used to take place, and these left their scars on me. And when I joined my battalion, there was further initiation rites that took place at that time. This is in the late 70s. And these also left their emotional, physical trauma, which I absorbed into my body. I didn't realize I was absorbing it. I was coping with it because men tend to bottle up their emotions. They don't talk about them. So we just absorb them and we hold them inside. Later on in Northern Ireland, I witnessed acts of terrorism, and I guess I must have absorbed these too. And I think if you were to put a label back in the 1970s, early 80s, they would have said it was PTSD nowadays, but then PTSD wasn't really talked about. I don't like labels. What I absorbed was just these experiences. Over 300 million people on a global scale suffer from depression. That means that everyone in this audience, because that's what this talk is really about, it's about us, this collective consciousness, this understanding that we all suffer, we all absorb trauma. For me, life can be traumatic. We remove ourselves from the natural world. Wallace Nichols wrote in his book, Blue Mind, "The mere sight and sound of water can induce a flood of neurochemicals that promotes wellness. It increases blood flow to the brain and the heart, and it induces relaxation. And that's what the ocean gives to me. It allows me to base out and to reflect. So my journey then, where did this journey of healing start? It started back in 2004, and it started when I met this lady at a symposium in North Wales. Just over an idle cup of tea, it's amazing what can happen. I said to her, "Where would you most like to paddle, Hadaz?" And she said, "Hokkaido." And I said, "Wow." Hokkaido is the northernmost island of Japan, and ever since I'd been a child, I'd dreamt about visiting Japan. I'd already started building up this image of going to Japan and paddling around it. So I said, "How do you fancy paddling around all 4 islands, Hadaz?" And she said, "Yes." She says, "If you're serious." And I was serious, and I had time on my hands. So we set off from Marina Kazazima, which is in Yokosuka-shi, a small city just south of Tokyo, and we started paddling south into what were uncharted waters. We had no charts, we had no real navigation equipment. We was keeping land on our right-hand side, and we knew that if we kept on doing that, we would come back because it's a circle. On our journey, we met some incredible people, some absolutely amazing people. This is the Armasan, the freedivers of Mie Prefecture, near to Nagoya. They dive for their catch. And this lady in the picture here, we were approaching this boat, and we was about 3 minutes out, and we didn't see anyone. And then just as we pulled up alongside, this lady came out like an Exocet missile. She burst through the surface, and her instant reaction was to turn to us and just hand over a catch. And that was the kind of generosity that we received. We got invited into so many homes, in so many people's lives, that it made a big difference to me. I started to realign my whole process. We met other locals along the way. This is a grizzly bear in Hokkaido, and quite often when we came in onto the beaches, we had to be careful about the wildlife that was out there. I never realized before we got to Japan that there were grizzly bears. One night we had a rustling outside of a tent, and it was on Hadaz's side of a tent, and I said, "What's that noise?" And she stuck her head out, and she said, "Oh, I think it's a pig." It wasn't, it was a bear. We also experienced these enormous typhoon-driven swells which rise up out of the Philippines. On this particular day, they recorded up to 9-meter swell size, and that closed out numerous safe landings. So we were having to live in tune with our instincts, but also having to live in tune with the environment. And I guess I absorbed the environment. I learned from it. I often say that Neptune is my coach. He's my personal mentor. And what I'm saying really is that I learned from the ocean. You can read from a book, but the ocean I feel taught me more. We tried to land on numerous occasions this day, and we couldn't get into many of the ports because they were just closing out with big crashing waves. And we landed at 2 o'clock in the morning, hypothermic, terrorized. It was a big learning curve for both of us. Japan is a volcanic landmass. It's a very ancient culture, but it's a very young land, and it's constantly changing. So I was seeing this land as it was starting to form, and it was amazing. We experienced 2 major earthquakes while we was over there, and 10 typhoons. It was a raw experience. And I believe that when you engage with the coastal environment, especially in rough water like the surf zone, it releases this supercharged electric cell. Okay, and they call them negative ions. And it's reputed that negative ions can help to deal with stress and help to deal with depression and anxiety. And I think that's what I've benefited from over the last 15 years of engaging with these negative ions, this electrified activity. Most amazing reason, or the most amazing thing about this whole journey for me was that 5,000 miles, we had 180 days to complete it in. We arrived back at the same place that we started from on day 180 with only 6 hours to spare before our visas ran out, and we had to get on a plane and fly home. And I can remember on that final night, paddling down the coastline, we was about 5 miles offshore, and out to seaward was this electrical thunderstorm, and I could see bolts of lightning just arcing down on the surface of the sea. It was an incredibly raw, powerful experience. And then 6 hours later, I'm standing in Narita Airport, and I'm surrounded by neon, I'm surrounded by plastic, I'm standing on concrete. Where the wind was in my face just 6 hours before, now I've got people breathing in my face. And I'm struggling with it. And I felt the ocean just starting to well up in my eyes. It was an incredibly powerful experience, both the experience of paddling around Japan, but also the exit. It made me really identify with the world that I wanted to exist in, which was the natural world. I was very lucky that this expedition actually managed to create a good reputation for myself in the kayaking industry. And I went on to circumnavigate South Georgia, which was the first British circumnavigation. And then I started to explore the Scandinavian peninsula. Leaving from Gothenburg, we paddled north until we got to Nordkapp, the northernmost point of Europe. In the north of Norway, there's an incredible group of people up there. They love the outdoors, and that's where I feel that's my second home, really. Cornwall is always going to be my first home, but Norway is my second home. I started to explore the mountains. I love the area where the mountains meet the ocean, and I took up dog sledding. And although I love my expeditions, and I really do love being out there, what's given me an absolutely amazing pleasure is to take other people with me. People are like onions. We develop this raw, husky exterior. But when you take people into the environment, out of their comfort zone, with people they've never met before, the ocean has this special capacity to be able to remove that outer husky layer. And what I get to see is that formative effect of the real person starting to come out again. And that's a massive honor and a privilege for me. This is a shot taken in Alaska under waterfall. This is another area where you get these vast abundance of negative ions. And this was a shot in northern Norway where I started doing winter trips. It drops down to about -30 here. And on this particular day, what we've got is a group of humpback whales that are shoaling the heron in close, and we've got orca all around us. And this particular humpback came up just in front of me and another paddler and almost swallowed the two of us. But you don't need to do these big journeys, okay? To benefit from these aspects of what the natural world gives us, you can just go down to your local beach. This was a photograph I took just 5 days ago at Swamppool, watching the sun come up, swimming out in the morning and seeing the sunrise in that early part of the day. And for me, swimming has now become all absorbing, and it's the way that I start my day most days of the week. I was defined in my early career by the army, and I had to break out of that. It was such a strong, powerful experience. I allowed it to define me for 20 years. It almost drove me to the point of suicide. Men's mental health has borders. We need to break down these borders. So I'd just like to end this presentation with a slide by someone who really inspired me as a young lad. He was Thor Heyerdahl, the master of the Kon-Tiki expedition, and he said, "Borders, I've heard they exist in the minds of some men, but I've never met one." Thank you very much, guys.